Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Big East Rewind. I'm Chuck Everson, your 7-foot host from Villanova, and my partner, as always, and we always say this, that he's a dentist, but he's actually talking to us from his office today, Dr. Sonny Sparrow. How are you?
I'm great, Chuck. I just want to point out, after
You don't
you
even
beat
have
me
to
up,
say it, Sonny. I
and
know
you know
where
I'm
you're
going to
going.
say it. It's a point
I know
guard,
where you're going. Yeah.
a prototypical point guard who was born to be a point guard and has had much success playing and as well as coaching. So can't wait.
Another point guard coach is in the house from the Pittsburgh Panthers, and
Not an
can't
accident.
wait to talk to him. No, it's not an accident. I don't get to formulate those words together when we're talking about big guys. You never get to say another big guy coach. That's after Patrick left, that was it for us, so
Hey, Greg
that's it.
McDermott. Greg McDermott.
Greg's still pretty big. You're right.
Okay. All
You're
right.
All right.
He
All
got
right.
covered. Yeah, Chuck. Yeah, can't sleep on him.
So
All right,
without any further ado, let me introduce our guest today, Sonny. He scored 1,282 points while at Pitt. He was the Big East Freshman of the Year in '87. He was a 3-time Pac-12 champion when he coached at AZ at Arizona. And a Pittsburgh Panthers legend, and now the current head coach at Xavier, the great Sean Miller. How are you, Sean?
Great, Chuck. Thank you for having me on, man. Excited to talk to you guys about the conference we all love.
Oh yeah, there's no doubt about that. We played. You're not much younger than us. I mean, we played right around that same time.
Sure. Yeah.
Sonny graduated in '85, and I was an '86 grad at Nova. So before we get into all the Pittsburgh stuff and what's going on with you, Sean, I gotta ask you, because I remember going to basketball camps and watching you perform with the basketball. How did that happen? Was that all from your dad, like just doing the Pete Maravich drills, and then all of a sudden you got like to be like a dribbling extraordinaire, right?
Yeah, it's sometimes as I reflect back, because I'm older now and we're going back almost 40 plus years ago, like to that scene as I think growing up then, if you remember, and I think the three of us grew up in the same generation.
Yep.
That you had hoops that were set at 10 feet and they weren't retractable. There really wasn't anything about shooting at a lower basket. So if you think about when you're in grade school back then and you love the game or you're in the gym, I mean, you had to dribble the basketball. And I think my dad, being a high school coach, an excellent one, and someone that, was equally a great dad, spent a lot of time with us, with me. I would tag along in the car, go to practices, games, like a lot of coaches' sons do. However, he was just really an amazing teacher. So I guess I was the type that loved the game at a very young age. So I became adept at dribbling, one basketball, two. And before you know it, it's like all of a sudden I could pretty much do anything with the ball, dribble 3, 4, spin them, whatever you could do. My passion was always to be a player, but I invested so much in the ball handling part of things at a young age that kind of became like a story in and of itself. How it became like more of like what I did beyond that. Sonny Vaccaro ran the Round Ball Classic. Did you guys play in the Dapper Dan Round Ball Classic at all?
No, I didn't play.
Remember it? You remember it, right?
Sure.
Absolutely remember.
Time, I came out at a young age, did the halftime show. And from there, I just, whether it's my dad speaking at camps and I was his demonstrator or other halftime shows. I did that for a while. And without realizing it, Chuck, I became a bullseye on a lot of like good players' walls, like I can't wait to get I can't wait to play against the dribbling wizard, things like that. But look, I developed that skill to be a good player, and my dad being a high school coach, that's how it happened.
It got you some TV time, Coach. I mean,
Johnny Carson,
and with Dr. J and Meadowlark Lemon and the Fish That Saved Pittsburgh.
Fish That Saved Pittsburgh.
So I'm 55 years old. I went on the Johnny Carson show, the Tonight Show, maybe at 12, 13, something. So you think about it, that's over 40 years ago. And I promise you, very certain in saying this, there hasn't been a month of my lifetime, a 1 month, a 4-week span that hasn't gone by since I've been on that show that somebody in some way, shape, or form will bring it up. For example, you guys just brought it up today. For a while there, it wasn't. Oh, it was like a week. Like there's nowhere I could go, and what it shows you is, back then, man, there wasn't a lot of channels.
Right.
Yeah.
You were on the
Right.
Tonight Show, like a lot of people saw you. So yeah, but that's how I got on the Tonight Show through the whole round ball halftime show, and yeah, the rest is history.
So you mentioned your dad. Your dad had a tremendous story. He was sick as a youngster.
Yeah.
And had to fight off polio and went through a very stressful thing. Became a high school coach. And now you're playing for your dad. What was that like? And what was that like with your teammates on your high school team? Because I know I played with R.C. Massimino, and obviously I played for Coach Massimino. So I know what it was like for him to be the guy in the locker room and everything. And everybody was kind of, at the beginning, we kind of walked on eggshells around them because you didn't want to say anything disparaging to about Coach.
Yeah, the pipeline.
We didn't know if he was a double agent. It turned out he was just the opposite of that. He never said anything about any of the stuff that went on behind the scenes. What was that like for you, that experience?
Well, playing for your dad at high school, I think, is different than in college, obviously. And I've talked to both Bobby Hurley and Dan Hurley about it. I think that my dad and their dad are similar. Obviously, Coach Hurley being in Jersey City, right in New York, it's a different area of the country. And I think the setup at St. Anthony's is certainly different than Blackhawk High School north of Pittsburgh. But I think the similarities between the two of them are, they loved the game. They were passionate about the game. They were strict, just held people to a high standard, and they were great teachers of the game. So first and foremost, I benefited tremendously from it, because he gave me what I think is the greatest gift you can give a player, and that is just a real love for the game itself. Forget coaching, playing, this, that. It's, I want to watch basketball. Basketball means something to me. When I'm playing it, I really enjoy it. When you're a coach, like you love to go to practice. It's kind of a part of who you are. And so that's really, we spent a ton of time together in the summer, especially because he's a phys ed teacher. In the summer, he didn't work, or he painted houses. And if he wasn't doing that, man, he was with me outside, inside, and you kind of grow up in a gym. That's what it was like for me. And my younger brother's 10 years younger than me. He's the current coach at Rhode Island.
Right.
He played at NC State. So between the two of us, and I have a younger sister who also played at Elon College, you could tell basketball is a fixture in my house.
So you're playing. So you play for your dad in high school. You had a great high school career, and then a young coach by the name of John Calipari comes knocking, right?
Yeah.
So what's that like?
Yeah.
Talk about that experience.
So Coach Cal and I have known each other. He's known me since I've been a child, 8 years old, 6 years old, whatever. The way it is both my parents went to Moon High School, and my uncle Tim is Calipari. Him and Cal are basically the same class at Moon High School, maybe one away from each other. So they're the same age. That's my dad's younger brother. So they all grew up in the same neighborhood, Cal and my dad's side of the family. And my dad being much older, he kind of took those guys under his wing. So I grew up with Cal. So, he went to UNC Wilmington. My uncle was influential in making that happen. And then all of a sudden, Cal became an assistant coach at Pitt. I was a player in Pittsburgh. And a big reason why I went to Pitt was because he recruited me. We had a great recruiting class. And he was a fixture, obviously. He was doing it then, the same thing that he's doing now as the new coach at Arkansas. He's the greatest to ever do it in terms of recruiting at the college basketball level. So, yeah, but I had a personal relationship, and I really have stayed in touch with Cal in a personal level for a long time. So him and I, sometimes there's a legend that we're related. We're not necessarily related other than I guess we grew up drinking the same water, and he certainly knew my dad and my uncle, and since he was a little kid.
So you're great at understatement, right? You were the number 2 recruiting class in the country at Pittsburgh, right? So no joke about it.
Yeah.
But I read something, and we were just talking about it before we got you on the air, how you were playing, but you weren't playing to where he expected you, and he came and had to sit down with you. What was that? What was that
Yeah,
conversation?
no, you know, it's a story that I've told a lot of players that I've coached, whether I've been an assistant and certainly the last 20 years as a head coach, because, you know, I think there's always those defining moments for you as a player. And you two guys know this. When you look back at your freshman year, I don't care who you are, at some point, like this doubt seeps into your mind that hasn't been there before. And you may go on to be an NBA one and done first round pick. For example, when I coached Aaron Gordon at Arizona, it was the month of November, and he was like so hard on himself, and he was out to prove to the world that he was a great player. That, I mean, he wasn't playing well, and he was one and done in the number 4 pick in the draft. And I would have told Aaron a version of this story. I told a couple of our players last year. So it'd be like October. I'm at Pitt. I'm a freshman. I'm not playing well. We had a great team. Charles Smith, Jerome Lane, Demetrius Gordon. But, you know, I was kind of, I wouldn't say kind of, I was very important to the cause because they needed a point guard to emerge. And I was the incoming freshman. And I will tell you that I struggled. I mean, freshman in the summer playing pickup, freshman in the month of September when the school year began, and then those grueling October and early November practices. You guys remember 2-a-days, you know, you didn't do
Remember
things
well.
coaches. They were brutal. Like, I don't know how to explain it. Like, it made no sense because they went against so many things that we don't do today. Like, why practice for 6 hours and 4 hours right away when you haven't done anything? You know, like all these things that the old school coaches did. But Calipari called me in his office probably about 3 weeks into it. He was the assistant coach, and he said, look, you know, basically, I'll just tell you guys how he said it. He said, if I would have known you're a pussy, I never would have recruited you to Pitt. Like, you know, I mean, this is like dog eat dog here. You're in the Big East. These guys are counting on you. I stamped you. I know where you're from. I think you have a level of toughness and you could be a good player. And by the way, we're not even asking you to do a lot. Just don't turn the ball over. But right now, I want you to notice you're the 3rd string point guard. You're behind a walk-on. And that's how the coaches feel. And that's how Coach Evans feels. And unless something changes, not only are you not going to play, but you know, number one, you're making me look bad as the guy who brought you in here. And number two, you're a pussy. Like you don't compete, like you're soft. And again, if that's how you're going to be, this might be the wrong place.
Wow.
You know, my dad, he was hard on me, but no one outside of my dad ever went down that path with me before. And quite frankly, he was right. I was like so worried about feelings. Am I doing this right, that right? But not only was I a freshman, but I was just overwhelmed, and that's how I looked. And, you know, sometimes a light switch goes on right away or maybe weeks later. But as I recall it, we had a practice later that evening. I went back in my apartment, or back then dorm, and just, man, had a long talk with myself. I came back and I said, you know what? You know, let me just try something different. And it wasn't like, you know, I sucker punched anybody or whatever, but it had been like the first couple minutes of a live scrimmage. And I just said, what the hell, let me try this other way. And it was just like a guy cut, and I just, bang, I just drilled him. And then I played, and that was okay. And it was almost like, I don't know how to explain it. Maybe if you're the quarterback, absolutely getting blindsided, blitz, knocked to the ground. And it's like, you get up and you're like, you know what? I lived. I'm fine. I'm going to be okay. That was my moment. But from that point forward, I understood that there was another element to this that had nothing to do with how well you could shoot. You know, did you know the plays? Could you defend it? There's a certain nastiness, toughness that you had to be a part of, and it had to be inside of you, or just playing in the Big East and at that period of time, it wasn't going to work. And I never forgot it. I will tell you this, that I got tougher as I got older, probably similar to you guys. But, you know, here I am a long, long time from that moment. That was a defining moment for me as a player. And Calipari would tell you that same version of the story if he were on here, that he was at that practice and was like, oh shit, at least he has a chance. That's probably what he may not be any good, but at least I got him to where he's not soft anymore. Like I see it, you know, so that was it.
It worked out, Coach, because you wind up being the rookie of the year your first year, the freshman of the year. So, whatever he said, different people have different ways of motivating, and if you're really good at what you do, you know what buttons to push for
Right.
each guy, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
no doubt.
you got to know
Chuck,
your players.
My first year was 87 and 88, and the Big East was probably at the top. That was right after the Final Fours you guys are a part of, right? I mean, you
Yep.
just, and Patrick Ewing had left, and the Big East was up and running, and we were kind of like that next wave, I think.
87, we lost to Indiana in the championship. Thanks for bringing it up. Go
So
ahead.
that's right. So the next year would have been my freshman year, and we had Charles Smith, who became the number 3 pick in the draft, Jerome Lane.
Yep.
Like Jerome was 18. Demetrius. We had a really terrifically talented team. My recruiting class, Bobby Martin, Brian Shorter, Darrell Porter, Jason Matthews, and myself, we came in as a group of 5. We almost played from day one. And man, it was just amazing, to think back to just how great the Big East was back then, and the teams
every night,
that group of players. And like, when you talk about toughness and just showing up night in, night out, I mean, not much has changed in the Big East since then. I can tell you that from the new coaching perspective, but I think all of us who played in the league back then, we still wear it as a badge, today.
Yeah, you're not kidding. And and every game you couldn't take a night off. There was no cupcakes back then,
Yep.
It's always a tough game. Everybody always gets up. The rivalries were something that were unbelievable. The Georgetown, Villanova, Syracuse, Georgetown,
but
you can go on and on,
But I got a great story I wanted to share with you guys.
Yeah.
Chuck, you may know this. So we had 4 of the 5 players in the recruiting class that I talked about were signed. One wasn't, and that was Bobby Martin. And Bobby Martin was from Atlantic City, New Jersey. And I don't know if you remember this, but he was verbally committed to Villanova.
Yep.
Coach Mass.
Okay.
And, as obviously I was a kid back then, I was still in high school, but as legend would have it, and we're 40 years later or whatever it is now, we've talked a lot over the years about, how we all came together. But Brian Shorter and Bobby Martin that year in 1987 were in the McDonald's All-American game together. And the game was in the Spectrum in Philly. And at that point, Bobby wasn't signed. He was verbally committed. Brian Shorter was his roommate. Big mistake by Villanova. He was signed. So these 2 guys, I think for whatever reason came together, became friendly. And Coach Cal was our, assistant coach in charge of different things. Well, as the night of the game approached, I think at that point you're allowed to kind of slide the national letter of intent under a door. You couldn't hand deliver it. That was the rule of the time. I think a national letter of intent from Pitt got slid under Bobby and Brian's door in the hotel that they were rooming in, for the McDonald's All-American game in Philly. Bobby signed it, slid it back out the door, and the next thing you know, we had our recruiting class complete, 5th member. I don't think Bobby did a good job explaining that to Villanova or Coach Mass.
Yep.
The game then went on, and as you know, one of the things about the McDonald's game is the pregame introductions, right? They go through the accomplishments, and they say from 6'9" from Atlantic City High School, who's going to attend Pitt, Bobby Martin. And that happened. Wow. And Coach Mass was in the stands, which again, back then you could go to the game. Coach Calipari is probably smart enough not to be at the game. No. I think Coach Mass went crazy. He's like, "Whoa, no. Yeah. Hey," went to the PA announcer, and he's going to Villanova. He committed, blah, blah, blah. And the PA announcer looked and goes, "Nope, he's going to Pitt." And so Bobby Martin went to Pitt. And for 4 years, and I was his teammate for 4 years, I cannot tell you what a difficult game Pitt and Villanova were from that moment. Do you remember?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Coach Mass and Coach Evans got, as I recall, almost in a fist fight after the game. And John Olive, who I've gotten to know, he's in San Diego, high school coach. Me and him have talked about it. And Jay Wright, I've talked to him over the years about it. But it became like such a blood game between Villanova and Pitt.
Oh yeah, and Doug West was a part of that whole thing too, if I'm not
Right,
mistaken.
like a whole separate chapter, which I
Separate thing.
either
Yeah.
came before, I think before, because Doug's a little older. Yep.
You know, it's funny when you guys and when you were playing, they used to have the Big East meetings, and if you didn't get along in the meeting, Dave Gavitt would put you in the same golf cart.
Yeah.
I don't know if he could have put Roley and Paul Evans in the same golf cart, man, without them crashing the cart or something. I mean, it was, and I was already out by then, but man, I definitely remember that. A couple of times they got in screaming matches on the sideline, and Coach Mass's Italian heritage got the better of them a few times, and
and then
it
down
was
the
crazy.
line, Coach Mass recruited Dante Calabria, who played for my dad at Blackhawk High School, and Dante ended up going to North Carolina, but it was a very difficult decision. He loved Coach Massimino. They had the Italian thing going
I was
together.
gonna say Dante. He's got to play for Mets.
Yeah, Coach Mass had him and his family won over, but so you know, Coach then he kind of came on my side. I became one of his guys then.
Yeah, that's funny. So talk about, you know, I gotta ask you about the play with Jerome. Send it in, Jerome. You were the guy that gave the ball up to him on that, right? On that fast break.
Yeah.
So what was going through your mind when you see him just rip the backboard down? And obviously you didn't hear Raph give his call until you saw it on the replay. But holy smokes! I mean, he just came down and tore that thing down, and that became an iconic play for the whole conference, right?
Whole conference.
Yes. And it is to this day, and rightfully so. I mean, if you watch the play in you know, highlights or real time, it's unimaginable. You can't believe it happened. But yeah, it was like a 3-on-1, and you know, made the right choice. The thing about Jerome is he was obviously could jump, very strong. All that speaks for itself. But back then, the breakaway rims only broke away forward.
Yeah.
So if you look at the angle that he came in on, it was like at the 45, and I think he caught it like with force at the right spot, and the rest is history. But here's the thing that's crazy. It was an and one. Carlton screen from Providence took a charge on the play, and they called it an and one. So, you know, poor Carlton had the whole backboard laying on him, and it was just crazy to think about it. The game was delayed, I think, for more than an hour. They had to wheel in a new backboard, and then we resumed playing the game, you know, almost like the game started with like Jerome shooting a free throw at the new backboard, you know, but it was an amazing play, and we still talk about it to this day.
Can you imagine if the ref comes in and waves it off and calls a charge?
Oh, forget about it.
He would have been killed.
Yeah. Yeah, that was that Fitzgerald, right? Was that where that was?
Yep.
I tell you what, Sean, that was one of the toughest places.
Nightmares.
Man.
That and the
oh my
Pulaski.
God. Especially when they had back when I don't know if they changed the floor then, but it was like it was almost like the floor was right on the cement. It was like playing on the asphalt. There was no give.
You're exactly right, Chuck. No give. I mean, you wonder like how guys didn't have stress fractures or whatever, because it probably was on the concrete, but that, and we had to play in these pony shoes. Do you guys remember pony? You guys you had the Nike contracts. We had this pony contract, and I mean, we would do anything in our power not to wear these shoes. So yeah, Jerome broke the backboard in pony shoes on cement, basically.
Oh man. Yeah, we had a very difficult time playing there. The one that really got was the year we won in '85. We got blown out of the gym, and coach went nuts at halftime there, and said and told the starters, "You got 2 minutes to play, or I'm taking everybody out." Yeah. And nobody stepped up, and he took everybody out, and it was the first and only time that I know of that CBS gave the player of the game to the Villanova second team. The whole second team got the so I have nightmares still about that place to play in.
You know, the coaching back then, I mean, I go through almost a roll call. Coach Calhoun was just getting things going at UConn.
Yep.
Pete Carlissimo was in a national championship game.
89.
In the hall. I mean, you had Coach Boeheim, you know, John Thompson, Louis Carnesecca. I mean, the coaches made that league. You know, Dave Gavitt was so brilliant in keeping these guys together and making them pull for the conference. But it's just you look at each of them in their own right, the individual careers that they had. It's just hard to believe that all of them were in the same conference at the same time.
You know what's interesting? I'm sorry, Sonny. You know what's interesting too, when you talk about the coaches, right? It's the only conference that I know of, and I haven't really been around. I can't tell you. I've spent a lot of time with people from the ACC. Now Sonny's there now, but he's the only one, at Syracuse.
Yeah, begrudgingly there.
Yeah, but everybody knew the referee by name too. They were all all like celebrities,
Exactly.
People would go, "Oh my God, we got Higgins tonight. Oh my God, Froggy." Larry Limbo. Oh no. And the coaches were like rock stars too, because every time something happened in a game, the camera went right to the coach.
Yeah.
Especially the feisty guys, they'd be running up and down the sideline and everything else.
Yeah, no question.
So I got a question. Your former backcourt mate who wanted me to ask you a question about something about pizza being taken from him before Pitt Syracuse game for the Big East Championship. Jason Matthews wanted me to ask you about, you might or might not have removed some pizza that was his. Something like that.
Sonny, the difference between me and a couple of those guys is, they recall every memory, of the playing days. And I feel like I got a great grasp, but I've been clouded with the 30 plus seasons and other games. So yeah, I don't quite remember what he's talking about, but yeah, I mean, different days back then. You come up to Syracuse at that point. What was the restaurant? And I would tell you this. So I will take Jason, what he said, and parlay it into something else. And that is one of the great moments I've ever had in my lifetime. Certainly one of the great moments in sports was in my freshman year. Syracuse and Pitt were tied for the Big East regular season championship. I think we were both 11-4, and the game was played like an early March at the Carrier Dome. And it was Brent Musburger and Billy Packer, CBS Saturday or Sunday, last game before the Big East tournament. And at that point, I think it was like a record crowd expected at the Carrier Dome. They had Ronnie Cycli and Derek Coleman, Sherman. We had Charles Smith, Jerome Lane.
I drove in from Buffalo for that game.
Yeah. So, and I was a freshman out there, and we won the game. So we crowned the Big East regular season championship. It was, I think, the first ever in Pitt history. And you think about, to win that league in that year was amazing. And to win it in the Carrier Dome on that court made it even more. But we went to that place, the Italian restaurant. If
Grimaldi's, probably.
What was it?
Grimaldi's?
I think so. Yeah.
That's probably it. Yeah.
And we had, when I say the time of our life, I mean, no rules were being followed. Alcohol, wine, we were at 19. It was like we had won the NBA championship, which was probably part of our demise. But at that point, man, I'll never forget, like, wow, this is the greatest feeling in the world,
But think about it. Like, Pitt was starting to get better. You guys come in, now you're winning Big East you're winning championships. It was a huge, I think, a huge change.
So I have that ring. That's the Big East regular season championship.
Oh, thanks.
Right,
I feel better now. Thanks.
Yeah, being the big, yeah. So.
Just wipe some pizza sauce on it. I'll feel better.
That's great.
I don't have a national championship.
I couldn't pay you enough to do that, Sean. I appreciate you doing that. That's awesome. Sonny and I go back and forth at each other all day long.
We're on the same team, man. We're point guards.
We've had so much fun doing this just for moments like that, because of the ball busting. It goes to different levels. It's like the locker room never has stopped. You know what I mean? So talk about some of the teams that gave you guys fits and some of the matchups that you had while you were playing with Pitt, and who the guys that gave you the hardest time.
Yeah, I mean, that's really easy for me. Georgetown in general was a nightmare for me.
Yeah.
And really, as a coach, I've always tried to keep that feeling inside of me of, I thought the thing that they had, just really, they mastered it, was at the jump ball, there was never more of an anxious moment from the perspective of, man, this is really going to be hard. They're like, this is really going to be difficult. Like the next 2 hours, everything about what I'm about to experience is going to take it all from me. And it's because of obviously their talent, but it was how hard they played. The effort level, the ferociousness, the physicality, the depth, and the way that Georgetown would sub. Coach Thompson being over there with the towel over his shoulder and just the stature and his booming voice. I mean, it just, no matter any game that I played against them, their full court pressure, Charles Smith, Marc Tillman, Dwayne Bryant. I mean, that group right there.
Yeah.
Slow dude from Pittsburgh. They weren't the group that I was looking forward to dealing with. So I think in general that really stood out. And then, Sherman Douglas at the Carrier Dome, Syracuse. I mean, Sonny, even today, by the standards of all the greatness that Syracuse has there ever been a point guard who's walked in those doors that has impacted winning more than Sherman? I mean, I know there's others that compare him to Pearl, but like Sherman Douglas during his time at Syracuse, he was the best, man. I mean, he was such a great player.
Yeah. I thought you were going to say that the Georgetown game, when they threw the ball up, everybody on Georgetown fouled somebody on Pittsburgh, and they couldn't
call foul you. There's no question.
Oh, yeah.
They couldn't call them all, though.
For sure.
That's it. The game has changed so much, though, right, Coach? I mean, is it that type of physicality now in the current Big East, the way it's situated?
So I think the new version of the game, and it's changed so much since we were talking about when we played. I think it's changed a lot in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
More smaller guys, skilled guys on the court at one time, much more like continuous movement, pace, flow. But in the Big East, yes, it's really physical. I don't know if you know this, but there's 32 conferences. Last year, we called the 32nd most fouls per game.
Oh, wow.
So is it physical? Yes, it is. Yeah, that hasn't changed. Hasn't changed. Yeah.
That's wild. I mean, it's, you think about it. I go to a lot of the Nova games. I've seen you guys play every time you come to the Finn, and it just seems like the speed of the game has changed drastically from when we all played,
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the things that are similar, and what are some of the things that are different in the game today versus the old Big East?
Well, first of all, let's start with this. Like, Chuck, you two guys, you played with a 40-second shot clock or 45?
We didn't have any.
We didn't have a shot clock.
Okay, so I think I inherited the 45 or 40. The ridiculous.
Yeah, you were. I think that was the first or second year.
That was the first. Yeah, I think it was my senior year. Was the first year. Yeah.
So just start with that. Like, I mean, that's not even like you can't. It's like a brand new world when you think about. We're at 30 today.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think that's the first thing. And then, pick and roll, back in the day, you might had one on a possession, or, I was a point guard and you look forward to having a few, but, 80% of the game wasn't pick and roll. It was something else. Today, it's, not that each program in the Big East, even today, that's all they do, but there's so much more of it. Dribble handoffs and pick and roll. And then I think the other part is just like more skill, like an old school 4-man, that they space the floor with fours. A lot of 4 men on the best teams that play college basketball. You think of Coach Wright, Jay Wright's teams at Villanova, think of that 4 position. They're a face up, right? Killer defender, long, but a guy that can really stretch the floor. And then, sometimes in Villanova is another example of a center that really is more of a face up. So there's so much more like fluidity and skill on the floor, and probably speed, just a faster game, no doubt about it.
So we talked about some of the rivalries in the Big East. Talk about the rivalry in your town in Cincinnati with University of Cincinnati against you guys. What goes on that week? I heard that's about as intense as it gets, right?
Yeah, it's called the Crosstown Shootout, and it started many, many decades ago. I think, Coach Huggins and Pete Gillen, not that it wasn't in place before that, it was, but, I think it kind of took on a whole new level. And sometimes, it's not easy for a Xavier guy to say this, but, what Hugs did at UC, kind of changing the profile and like renewing their greatness as a program and competing for Final Fours, recruiting to Final Fours, really the pinnacle of year in, year out NCAA tournaments. It really forced things here at Xavier, like either we're going to try to join in and raise our level, or we're going to get just smashed. And I think a lot of the rise at Xavier coincided with, look, there was a lot of pressure on us from the Cincinnati side of their investment and their history and what they were trying to do. And if we're going to keep up, we had to invest, and that happened. And, what's crazy about the rivalry is at one point, maybe we were in the Great Midwest or, the Horizon League and all the different leagues that maybe we were as a program in here at Xavier. And they went through their fair share as well. But remember, UC, they were in the Big East.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cincinnati was in the Big East. Xavier was in the Atlantic 10. I mean, that happened. And right now we then became a part of the Big East. They weren't. And now they're a part of the Big 12 and we're a part of the Big East. But regardless of what conferences we've been in, they're only about 5 miles from us. Think about that, the proximity.
Yeah.
You guys experienced that in Philly.
Yep.
And look, there's no NBA franchise in our city. It's a pro town. It's a sports crazy town. And so if you love basketball, the love has always been towards college basketball. You think about who we're surrounded by. Louisville and Kentucky to the south, 1.5-hour drive. Purdue and Indiana to the west, couple-hour drive. Ohio State about 90 minutes north. I mean, you go through that footprint and you're like, wow. I mean, there's some programs that have won national championships all around us. So college basketball is a big deal in Southwest Ohio, but there's no game that I've participated in that has the intensity of Xavier UC in the crosstown shootout. None.
So I got to ask you, you started out as an assistant at Xavier with Thad Matta?
Yeah. Yes.
So talk about that relationship. And now he's at Butler and you're at Xavier. Like it's kind of like a renewal of some sort.
Yeah, Thad and I are really good friends, period. We actually shared an office at Miami of Ohio. He was an assistant. I was an assistant. Charlie Coles was an assistant, and Herb Sendek was the head coach. Some of the great days of my life were right there. Had a great time. So Thad and I have been really good friends ever since. Worked alongside of him here at Xavier. But yeah, we're at that point where we've been friends a lot longer than we've been rivalries at Butler and Xavier. So our friendship transcends that rivalry. We want to win the game, but yeah, it's not awkward in any way, shape, or form. And I think we're both grateful to be here.
Yeah, it's just neat how it kind of came, almost full circle.
Full circle,
pretty cool.
yeah.
I think he's one of the most underrated coaches in the Big East. I mean, I watched them play, and he's really, really good at what he does. He's really good, and I don't think he gets enough credit. Do you agree with that, Coach?
For sure. And Thad is just generally understated in his approach to things. But if you look at what he did at Ohio State, I think he was the head coach there for 13 years. I mean, it's amazing. Big Ten tournament titles, Big Ten regular season titles, 2 Final Fours, Elite Eights, total wins. I mean, he really did an amazing job. And he did an equally amazing job both here at Xavier before he left. And then he was at Butler 1 year as the coach there. So yeah, he's a terrific coach, doing a great job at Butler in a very top to bottom crazy league we're in right now.
Yeah.
Sure.
I got to ask you about some of the big changes that have occurred over the last couple of years. This year in the portal, how are you guys managing that as coaches? Because I think, what did you lose? Like 9 kids this year in the portal, and you got 7. Now you got a couple of real good players came back. Your guy McKnight, who's a real good player, and Fremantle, and then you picked up Cromwell and Hewley, both good players. Cromwell's the shooter, right? So how does that work? I mean, is that a combination of, hey, Mr. Whatever, Joe Smith, right? Hey, you're not working out with this. This is not for you. We'll help you get another spot. Or is it, just the kid saying, okay, I'm not going to be able to do it here. I'm going to go get a better deal, or is it a combination of both? And how do you keep you can't keep everybody happy. It's impossible. So what's your thoughts on that and how you deal with all of that?
Yeah, well, the first thing that I would say, Chuck, is that every situation is a unique situation, different from the next. I mean, so it's tough to categorize and make just a broad statement. But what I will tell you is, in our world today, I believe you build a program through individual rosters. So anybody that starts to have too big of a picture or is playing the long game too much, there are too many factors that as a coach, you can't control today that you could have 3 years ago, let alone 10 years ago.
That's a great statement.
What I mean is just when you can transfer and not sit out, you now can transfer more than once, not sit out, and you don't have to graduate. You're kind of made to feel that if you perform well at school A, regardless of what the name of the school A is, that if you would try to leave there and enter the portal, that you could potentially make more money somewhere else if that's what you wanted to pursue. I'm not saying that's true,
right?
But that's how it is. And then, the final part, which I think is the trickiest to deal with, we talked about how difficult your freshman year is. And sometimes if you just judged even some of the teammates that you guys have had by only their freshman year, they wouldn't have been very good. But when you watch that version grow into a junior, you're like, wow, he's an all Big East performer. But in so many cases today, when they don't get off to the fast start, they don't stick around to fight through it and get to year 2, year 3. And look, no matter what, when they go to their second place, they're going to find that there's still going to be those same obstacles and adversity present that there was in their first school. So the big point that I would make is there's a lot of change. I think as a coach, it's not about taking it personal. You just try to do the best that you can of like coaching, teaching, holding them accountable, telling them the truth, creating an environment where they can grow and develop, and understanding that in your best attempt, there's going to be more change. And when there's change, sometimes you have an opportunity to bring in a player like Sule Boom, Quincy Oliveri, or a couple of the guys that you named this year for us. Past spring, what we ran into is, 2 of our players from a year ago, Zach Fremantle and Jerome Hunter, they would have been starters on last year's team. And everybody knew that. They both had season-ending injuries, and then they both decided to come back. So if you are a younger player in our program, part of now what you're looking at is, well, I'm going to come back, coach, but Jerome and Zach are going to now be on next year's team. How does that now affect me? And look, it affects them, right? Because of that, some of our younger guys, they moved to different programs, and I wish them well. But the way we're building things at Xavier, Chuck, is I think it's a blend. Try to get the right high school players and those that can impact winning and grow and develop. You feel like that they're about growing and developing as well. And then, you try to take advantage of getting different players and people on transfers that can impact winning in a different way. Put it all together. That becomes your roster, knowing that in your best attempt from one year to the next, there's going to be more change than you're used to. So we're all adapting and evolving and growing. That's kind of what we're trying to do here at Xavier. And, and sometimes, by the way, in this system that we're currently in, I believe it's like flying a plane and building it at the same time. There are just certain rules and regulations that aren't here yet that just need to be here that could help everybody.
Yeah, it's got to be tough to put your fingerprints on a program or your cultural idea of what it should be in the locker room and everything else when you have 7 or 8 new guys every year. I mean, that's got to be the challenge that I just can't imagine it, because like you said, I mean, you said about somebody not having a great freshman year, and then when you and I and Sonny were playing, I didn't love Coach Mass every single day. There were days, boy, you know the deal with Paul Evans and but I didn't turn around and run away from it. I toughed it out, and was better for it, and I don't see that as much anymore. It seems like, the kids just jump at the first sign of adversity. They jump and go to another ship. And I don't know. I mean, and the other part of it is there's a lot of guys that go in the portal, and just because they scored 15 a game at a mid-major place like a Stony Brook or something, doesn't mean they're going to do that in the Big East or the ACC, and there's a lot of guys that don't even, what happens to all the guys that, I think there was 1,800 people in the portal this year.
Yeah.
What happens to the guys that don't get picked up?
So I think, to your point, a couple years from now, I think we'll have more data, and I think some of that data will help future decisions, because it's not always about leaving one place and going to the next. And by the way, sometimes, Chuck, I'll tell you, and I'll use Sule Boom and Quincy Oliveri as two great examples. Both had already graduated from their previous place. One was at UTEP, one was at Rice, both in Conference USA. And they wanted to put themselves on the biggest stage with the brightest lights and go against the best of the best in college basketball. They had their degree, they had one more year, and they took advantage of it in a significant way. They impacted our program and team. I think they, in their own respective careers, they used this as a trampoline to do some amazing things. So sometimes, you welcome the change, because it does, in fact, help the young player. It help that type of person maybe just do some things that they otherwise could not have done. If you watch Cam Spencer and Tristan Newton, great examples of decisions that they made, and you kind of look at for the rest of their life and where they go, maybe that final decision is the one they look at as, man, thank God I did that. So I do think there's some good with it. There just has to be a few more rules and guardrails. And look, I think it protects not only the coaches and the programs, but I think it'll help families and the student athletes as well make the right decisions at the right time with some more, just do this, you can't do that, this is why.
I want to ask you, because one of the things I was looking at and reading over was talking about one of your traits that stands out as a coach is your ability, and you talked about, I want that young man to develop a love of the game, and it comes through loud and clear. You talked about your background and where it comes from, but it also seems that you really help develop a lot of players to push beyond their initial potential. Maybe the John Calipari talk, but you are giving it to these guys too, and getting them right. Like, they think they can reach this high, and you think they can reach higher, and then they do. Talk about some of the things that you believe in and you put it into your players.
Yeah, I think a lot of it starts with strength and conditioning. I really believe that. There are certain things that you learn in the weight room that you can't get from just the basketball court. Being able to push beyond what you think you can do. There's no better place to learn that than in the weight room. I mean, we've all have examples of, you wanted to do 5 reps and you ended up doing 11. Well, how in the world did that happen? Like, you wanted to work with the 25-pound dumbbells, and somebody said, no, you're going to do 40s. And you're like, well, I can't do that. And you did. And I also think the other part of strength and conditioning is when you start dedicating yourself to being in the best shape of your life, it's amazing how many other great things happen. And I think look, no one does it better than Rick Pitino. He's done it forever at every place he's ever coached. And he develops players at the highest level. I almost learned that watching him, being recruited by him. How does he get someone like Billy Donovan to go from where he was at Providence College to becoming who he became? I think Billy would tell you, like, being in a level of conditioning that he had no idea he could even get to. So I think the strength and conditioning area is a part of it. I think the second part of it is just, look, basketball is year round. You don't become a good player from early September to March. It's like, man, you have to invest in the summer. You have to be in the gym. And when you're in the gym, there's got to be some purpose behind it. I think as a coach, you can help them define that purpose of, I go in the gym and I work at a certain level. And, you start to get them committed, strength and conditioning. And you start to really let them embrace this game. and investing in the off season, after practice, before practice, during the season, to do extra. And then I think the final part is, you really just try when you recruit to pick people that fit your system. I certainly don't always get it right, but man, when you get that part right, it's like magic. It's so much easier to watch that young player thrive. And I'll give you a great example. We had a ready-made team at Arizona, and we were missing a point guard. And I really felt that TJ McConnell, who at the time was at Duquesne, and he was going to transfer, would have been the perfect fit for the team that we already had in place. I mean, we had Aaron Gordon and Caleb Tarzewski and Nick Johnson, Rondé Hollis Jefferson. I mean, we had a really good team, and we needed that winner at the point guard position. And TJ became a part of what we did. He sat out and he played 2 years. He had a great run, but TJ was always about, like, coach, I want to please all these guys. They're all pros. I'm the point guard you brought in to help make them pros. I'm a pass first guy. And man, it's hard being me. They're all mad at me after every game. One guy score, I need to get the ball. You only pass it to him. And it really wasn't like that. But from TJ's eyes, he felt obligated to make everybody happy. And finally, one day, me and him had a huge talk. I think he would tell you that even today, it's one of the things that really changed his course. And that was, look, quit worrying about all these other guys. Why don't you start worrying more about yourself? And who says you can't be a pro? Like, why are they pros and you not? And I do think that sometimes it's up to you as a coach to create a more of a sense of belief inside that player that, no, you could be better than yourself. No different than if you feel like you can do a certain thing in the weight room and yet you could do a lot more than you thought. Same thing can happen on the basketball court. So, I think getting a good fit for your style. And then the other part is just trying to connect as best you can with every one of your players. Some you're going to connect with more, but TJ, to watch him finish year 9 with the Pacers, I mean, he may play 12, 13 years as an NBA point guard. And I'm telling you guys, nobody would have bet on him.
Yeah.
Yeah. He had a great series too against the Knicks.
Game in the Knicks. Yeah.
Yep.
So speaking of, I mean, I don't know if people understand the rabid fans at the Cintas Center, and Xavier, my cousin, is a huge booster and everything else. And he went there, and our whole family's moved to Cincinnati for the most part. And, I don't know if they really appreciate the environment that you play in. So with that in mind, I got a couple quick Cincinnati questions for you. Ready?
Yeah. Yep.
All right. Chili, Gold Star or Skyline?
I like both. I'm definitely Skyline, though. It's like has a chocolate flavor to it. Sounds
It does.
weird.
I think it has cinnamon in it.
You got to try it. Yeah.
All right. So then how do you have it? How many ways? 3-way, 4-way?
I go 1 or 2, depending on my mood, but no doubt you got the hot dog, you got chili, cheese. That's definitely a fixture. 1, 2. Mustard is probably a strong 3. So it's usually those 3, but every once in a while, Sonny, you got to go with the onions as well. And I think if you go onions, mustard, cheese, chili, and you go 3 deep, I think 3 of them is what you want. I recommend the barbecue chips. You wash it down with your version of Pepsi, Coke, and I'm here to tell you, it takes you to a place that changes your life. It changes your life. You got to try it. It may not sound good to everybody, but when you're in Cincinnati, just hit that drive-through. It. You'll know what I'm talking about.
Well, the first time I ever had it was over pasta, and I was like, I can't do this, but I developed a love
more
for
hot
it.
dog. Yeah.
I love it. All right, this next one, this is my last question for you. Grater's ice cream, best flavor?
Not even close. Black raspberry chocolate chip.
Black raspberry chocolate. Thank you.
You got to try it. The chocolate in there is, I mean, it's
chunks.
like an entire candy bar. Yeah, it's not chips. It's definitely chunks. Great way of putting it. But Grater's ice cream is magnificent. You can get it in any Kroger grocery store. Fries. You got to try it. Yeah, it's amazing. It really is. Yeah.
And on that note, Coach, we can't get any better than that than ending with the chocolate ice cream.
I was ready to go into the ribs, but
black cherry.
In Philly, what about the cheesesteak?
Oh, I'm a Pats guy.
Well, listen,
Sorry.
I've been all around now, and everybody says there's a spot in Northeast Philly that everybody loves, and I can't think of the name of it, but I am a Pat's guy myself, or Jim's. I like Jim's because they chop it up nice.
Yeah.
Sometime, and Jim's burnt down. I don't know if you know that, and they just redid it. So Jim's is probably my favorite, and I also like Larry's, which happens to be right next door to St. Joseph's, but I don't let anybody know that. But that's where Kobe used to go for his cheesesteaks.
I'm a Pat's guy.
Pat's, yeah. That's the one thing, I was at Arizona for 13 years, and they live way too healthy out there. There's salad options at every corner, and they eat more seafood. And, I miss just the East Midwest. We don't care about that. Let's just throw some cheese on there,
That's great. That's great. That's a man right after my own heart there, Sonny. I got to tell you.
I love that. I ate lunch recently. I'm sitting here starving after your description of the skyline.
Yeah.
I'll be honest.
Listen, he's all in. There's no doubt about that.
In Pittsburgh, obviously, you guys know about Primanti Brothers.
Yeah.
And, it's hard for me to explain Primanti Brothers to people. And I will tell you, if Primanti Brothers opened in the West, they would fail miserably, because it's Mancini's Italian bread, super thick, not only French fries, but thick French fries, coleslaw, your protein of choice with some type of cheese. It takes almost a hammer and a saw to cut it in half. And you look at that thing, you have to put red hot on there. And again, I put it in that Skyline chili category. Primanti Brothers in Pittsburgh, that's the sandwich right there. Every sandwich that you get has what I described accompanying it, unless you tell them no. Have you guys ever had it?
No, I have not.
You got to try it.
Yeah. I'm in now.
Next time you're in Pittsburgh.
Yeah,
Primanti Brothers.
We got to make a road trip, Sonny. No doubt.
I'm in.
No doubt. So,
PNC
Coach,
Park and the sandwich.
PNC Park and and yeah, that'd be great. I'm in. Let me know.
Chuck,
Coach, thanks a lot.
Before I sign off here, I know we're out of time, but I was on a plane with my wife, headed last spring to Florida, and I was sitting there, and a guy on a napkin drew up like an underneath out of bounds play. And you imagine I'm like half sleeping on a plane in the spring, season's over, and the guy gives me an underneath out of bounds play, and I think he had a name on it. And I was like, who is this guy, right? So I look back, and he had, grayish hair, kind of like yourself, Chuck. And I looked at him, and I was like, man, he looks familiar. And it was Marc Dowdell.
Oh, really?
And he said, that's the underneath out of bounds play we used to run against you and kick your ass at Villanova Pitt. But
that sounds like Marc.
We were together, and so we went
That's
to the
hilarious
place. But similar to our conversation today, when you play in a Big East, you're kind of in your own brotherhood, and it was just like amazing some of the stories him and I could share with each other about our time, his time at Nova, my time at the Big East. So always great to talk about it.
It really is a bond and a brotherhood. We're finding that out the more shows we've done here, and you know what else you'd be surprised at too, Sean. It's you got an Orangeman here, and now he's buddies with a bunch of Hoyas, which like nobody can believe. He almost had to give his orange card back. He almost had to turn it back into Boeheim.
Yeah, sometimes I got to go in different entrances in the dome now because of that, but it's a different story.
Meanwhile, he's hanging out with Gene Smith and Michael Graham. So there you go. Who would have thought? So
two killers right there. I mean, those two guys on the court were, again, back to my point. You didn't want to see either of them wearing a Hoya uniform. They were
no, that is true. That is very true.
Yep.
Well, Coach, thanks so much for joining us. We really enjoyed talking with you and giving us a lot of your time. I know you're busy. You're building your team back for the next year, and best of luck to the Musketeers this year. We'll look forward to seeing you on the road. I'll definitely stop and say hello now when you come to the Finn. I certainly will.
Yep. It's great talking with you guys. Yep. And appreciate what you do. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks, Sean.
You've been listening to the Big East Rewind with Sonny Sparrow and Chuck Everson. The Big East Rewind was produced and directed by Nick Chico Corus and Daryl Gurney. Check us out on all things social media by putting Big East Rewind in the search bar. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. Thanks a lot. Have a great night.
Thanks, folks.